Welcome back. We now move on to one of the most awaited and look forward to this discussion. This was the most awaited panel for the day in day 3 of the Global Digital Summit, 5G technologies and the 5G technology infrastructure. This is going to be moderated by Anza Saqib Akhund. Without further ado, over to Anza.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shehzad Sikandar. It's an honor to be here today and be able to moderate this session. I've been going in and out of sessions today, and let me congratulate CXO Global on doing a fabulous job. Hats off to all of you. You've put together a brilliant summit. So without further ado, let's talk about today's hot and pressing topic. So it's 5G technology and infrastructure. Now, what's really interesting is that CXO Global has put together a very interesting panel from around the world. Joining us today is Mr. Igor Tasic, who's the founder of Meta Ventures. Then we've got Mr. Ubaid Yunus, who's the partner manager, APAC, for network investments at emerging markets, Meta, which is Facebook, and Mr. Haaris Mehmood, the CEO of Universal Service Fund, Pakistan. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So having said that, my first question is for you, Igor. When we talk about 5G, there's been a lot of buzzwords around, the term 5G. I know that since last year, we've been hearing that some network operators have already started testing it, and it's available in some countries around the world. How do you think this transition from 4G to 5G will happen in different parts of the world?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the invitation to the forum. Actually, I was just watching the president of Pakistan's speech this morning, and he was talking about data. And I think 5G is completely related to this access of data that we still don't have total perception of what's going on. And I think it's a challenge that many countries are still figuring out how to regulate, how to bring, and even the corporations on how to actually use these new possibilities of acquiring such an amount of data, like the president was mentioning, and making sense of it. I think we have physical aspects that are still being discussed. So I follow a lot in other countries what's going on. For example, recently in Brazil, they just auctioned the new broadband waves for 5G. But most importantly, what types of content, how people are going to perceive this, how are going to make sense of these IoT devices that are going to be connected, how cars will be connected, how cities will be transformed. We have many layers of challenges. I think we're going to discuss this over this panel. But that's what I see as a beginning of how governments, corporations, and citizens, consumers are making sense of all of this.
Right. Thank you. And before I move on to my next speaker, I would again like to ask you, the world, are we prepared right now in terms of the infrastructure? You said that there are a lot of legacy devices that we're seeing there. We're going to be looking at a lot of IoT implications in the future as well, for which 5G is a must. But infrastructure-wise, let's talk about South Asia and particularly Pakistan. From the perspective that you're sitting in, do we have the relevant infrastructure?
Myself and anyone else here?
Yes.
I think there is, Pakistan has from my outside perspective, what I see, you are in a very good position, geographically speaking, in terms of the connection between the East and the West, in the sense that China's initiative on the
Absolutely, that's what
road.
I wanted to hear.
Yeah,
Get
the importance of creating a common ground for expanding infrastructure, to bringing these outside investments like China that I know they're very interested in expanding. This is critical. Without this, the rest of the world, the new internet, which is something that I'm interested right now, will not exist. So it's a key component of investment, and sometimes people don't talk much about it because we all get dragged into the content of the software discussions, but infrastructure is everything.
Absolutely. Thank you. And, let's move on to the next speaker and see what interesting insights they have to share with us. Mr. Ubaid Yunus, welcome to the panel. Thank you for joining us. So, with your level of expertise, now we know that you are a Pakistani, but you're looking at a very broad network of emerging markets, right? So, my question to you is, again, something that I asked Igor as well. Now, belonging from this part of the world, South Asia in particular, where do you think we stand in terms of the infrastructure requirements for what's to come?
So thank you very much for the question, and it's a pleasure to be in this panel. Thank you, CISO Global, for arranging this wonderful panel. I think when it comes to the readiness of 5G, I think there is some ground to be covered in terms of infrastructure, both from the angle of what we call the core network or backhaul network to the access network. There are some fundamental gaps that needs to be filled, and I'll talk about them, a couple of them. And apart from that, I think from a whole overall like societal readiness, also there are a couple of things that that all the countries who are 5G ready have done differently or better in the past 5 to 10 years, where I think Pakistan has a lot of examples to learn from. I'll touch a couple of those, and I think one is that from a 5G perspective, the real advantage of a 5G network is the latency. Now, we all understand from engineering background, people who are involved in the technologies, that understand that latency, in order to kind of improve the latency drastically, you need to bring the content very near to the customer. So that starts from your like international connectivity and the data center structure in Pakistan, the neutral data center structure, where generally the content can reside, or like the local cloud systems can, if you are accessing all the services, your e-commerce and everything is hosted somewhere around the globe, there will always be some limitations to the latency that you're accessing. Similarly, when it comes to the middle mile, I think there's some fundamental gaps in our urban infrastructure, the fixed line infrastructure that forms the basis of backhaul for a higher throughput or better latency mobile network is not at par. It's not that it doesn't exist; it exists. But I think in order for us to kind of be ready for 5G and provide the full experience, it needs to be upgraded. It needs to be penetrated a bit more, taken to indoors at times. In fact, all the commercial and residential buildings should have an accessible, should have an access to fiber, direct fiber. Though that infrastructure is not in place. So I think that is some area that, from the policy perspective, from the infrastructure, and also from the investment perspective, should be something that the ecosystem should be looking at. So
absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Ubaid. And it's interesting, some of the things that you mentioned, but I know this for a fact from my earlier conversations as well. And it's lovely that we have Mr. Haaris from USF here, because we know the kind of work that these guys have done on ground in terms of connecting with the telecom sector and providing the fiber optic side of things. So let's hear it from the man himself. So what is your take on some of the comments that Mr. Ubaid made?
Thank you, Anza, for taking me on the panel. And Ubad, what he was mentioning is he was right. There needs to be a certain infrastructure that has to support the 5G technology. And you and all the rest of the panel will be very pleasantly surprised that for 5G readiness, USF has taken various steps. So in the rural areas, the relevant infrastructure which needs to be provided for 5G, which should be laid before the 5G is rolled out in Pakistan. As he said, that for the backhaul infrastructure, we need defiberization for 5G. So in Pakistan, Universal Service Fund has taken that initiative that in 3,000 milliconsoles of Pakistan, which are not connected with the fiber, we have started various projects in southern Punjab, southern Balochistan, interior Sindh, north of KPK, even in central Punjab, where there's no fiberization. So we are making sure that the fiber is laid to the Union Council level and it can be ready for 5G deployment. We're also connecting school, colleges, hospitals to that fiber, and also directly to the tower, so which is going to give them ample, in terms of capacity. So if the 5G technology is to be rolled out, the relevant infrastructure will be in place.
Right. Thank you very much for sharing those insights. And we now take my next question to Igor. Now, it was very interesting that you mentioned Pakistan is at the nexus of the East and West, and obviously will hold a lot of importance, especially with the advent of 5G. Where do you see any possible lapses or areas in which we need to be aware of in terms of when we're setting not just the infrastructure on ground, but even in terms of the deployment or in terms of the regulations? What would your recommendations be?
I'm very, I think, and I think this topic is super interesting. This is that everything is so new in this space that people don't know how to make sense of it. I'm going to give an example. South Korea, they are very advanced in 5G adoption, but still they are looking for their killer app, their killer use. They don't know that they have it. The infrastructure is there. Everybody's using, everything is connected. But the people, when you talk to the people, they don't feel that big difference because it's still not there. It's like, because we are talking about, we have infrastructure that is key. Then we talk about this super futuristic stuff that everybody talks, and then we have the hypes and the Elon Musks of the world. But then the middle ground, which is the orchestration of the networks, of the interoperability, of how, like the president was saying this morning, how we can extract the data, how can we create an ecosystem of services, of people. For example, I'll give a very interesting example that I saw recently. Huawei, they were doing deployment of 5G on university campus. That is great. I mean, from a very basic level, giving students a widespread access to the technology can allow for new types of contents to emerge. So it's all about infrastructure. So I think Pakistan, like every country in the world that is adopting this, can set the tone, can show the way, it can be the case, the use case that everybody can look at and say, hey, I don't believe in this technology, but look, let's look at this country. Pakistan could be a leading country in that sense, but let's look at how they're using this.
Absolutely.
So we can discuss more about it. But
and
that's one of the ways I see it.
Yeah, those are inspiring words indeed, and they give us a lot of hope. But I would like, Igor, for you to elaborate a little more about, it's brilliant that you mentioned Pakistan can be used as a test case. But if you've been looking into the market here, which are some of the industries or sectors, like, for instance, you mentioned education, where Pakistan can be the best, present the best use case example for the implementation of 5G?
I will refer back to the president's words in terms of the capacity of deployment. Pakistan, from my experience building startup communities around the world, even with the people at CXO Forum that I got in touch a long time ago, I see a lot of talent in the new world, in the sense of software development, hardware development, this intelligence applied to technology, which refers to education, but not only, that it's the huge demand from now on. I think, and the advantage that maybe this is something new, and especially now during COVID, because we're still during the pandemic, that if we can bring this talent, that no matter where people are, and get their capacity of producing super quality service. And I will use software development as an example, but it's just one example. It could be anything. It could be math teaching, could be cooking teaching, and be a example of deployment of both creation of the infrastructure of the young people being educated on that, and then showing how to deploy, and show the orchestration of infrastructure development, government support, all of this that is kind of a connected. These are things that are very easy. I'm an entrepreneur, so I speak in entrepreneurial terms. That could be an MVP, a minimal viable product, as a country to deploy this use of technology, so the world can be inspired. And the fact that, again, that I mentioned before, the fact that Pakistan plays such an important role in connecting China to the rest of the world, even geographically speaking, the importance of the Karachi port. These type of things play up very well in this next stage of the 21st century that I think now we are actually entering.
Thank you. That's an interesting take on the answer. Mr. Ubaid Yunus, so we do know that with Meta and the world has literally changed around us with the new recent announcements about alternate reality and virtual reality, augmented reality for that matter. However, in a place like Pakistan, where we've got more than 60% of our population that's under the age of 35, won't even say that we're going to be catering to Gen Z, but Gen D, D standing for digital. But we also, from the perspective that we're looking at, we do see that there is a massive requirement for better infrastructure in terms of the connectivity. And do you think that for the APAC region, there could be challenges to, investment for Meta in this particular region? Maybe we're going to be way behind the rest of the world.
Yeah, no, so first of all, I think Asia Pacific presents a huge opportunity because of the young population. Like, not only the numbers are profound in the region, but the adoption of technology is at times faster. And the young population makes a very lucrative case for any new adoptions of technology. Having said that, I think the real challenge would be, so I'll give you a couple of numbers. So the infrastructure that is around the world for telecom or for providing internet, there's been a renewed private equity coming into the infrastructure space for the past 2 years. There's been more than $90 billion private equity investments have come into this sector in the past 2 years. Like, if you compare that to 2019, there's like fivefold. So that capital is coming in. Unfortunately, only 2.5% of that capital has actually come into the Asia Pacific. And that is one area where I think the opportunity lies for policymakers or for the movers and shapers of the telco industry to make it such a viable case for that equity to flow in, because that equity will actually fast track the infrastructure development. Infrastructure development inherently is a costly affair. The governments will never find the fiscal space to spend $20 billion in building that infrastructure. The private sector within the realms of these national boundaries will not have enough of their capex to be spent in that direction, because their ARPUs are generally on the lower side. So it has to be done in partnership with private sector, with private equity, like long-term cheaper funds that come in, do this drastic development. But having said that, for all future experiences, there has to be 2 to 3 philosophical directions, and one should be that this experience should be equitable for all. It cannot be 5G or any future generation of technology cannot be for selected few in affluent areas, in city center. There has to be a philosophy around policy making or around designing, that it has to be an equitable internet for all, so that it is a great leveler. A person sitting in a remote village should have access to the international level courses and education through technology. If we can make it possible, there is no better opportunity, and that eases out a lot more other problems of urbanization, uh, demand and supply gaps that we normally see in cities in Asia Pacific. So what I
Absolutely.
really wants to summarize is that there is a huge opportunity with the size and the demography of the population. The infrastructure gap is there, but there are examples to emulate. It just needs a nurturing environment for the capital to flow, and a nurturing environment where infrastructure can be executed faster.
Absolutely.
Just a
And
quick comment.
right.
Quick comment
Go
on
on,
Obaid's
Igor.
comment is that I
Yes.
totally agree with you, Obaid, in the sense that it's not only and it goes back, the capital and the content goes together, because it's if the capital, if everybody should join in, not only the public sector but the private sector and all players, the content development and this connection, these use cases around is also an ecosystem wide play. You know, so the use of in agriculture is huge, the potential development. So just to comment on something that I think goes hand in hand.
Absolutely. And I'm going to second that, because working in the edtech sector with a UK-based company, we've been working on ground with public and private schools. So I can speak for my sector at least. Lately, we have been seeing a lot of digital inequality and digital divide, which is why you said even the experiences of users are different throughout Pakistan. However, I do know this for a fact that the USF, and I'm going to take this question to Mr. Haaris. Sir, are you still with us?
Yes.
Right. So like I was saying, that I was reading recently that the Universal Service Fund has launched a deep fiberization project, and it has been anticipated by the Ministry of IT and Telecom that they're aiming to roll out 5G by 2023. Now, how equal will that rollout be throughout Pakistan, and how achievable is that figure and that target of 2023?
You know, if the policy decision is being made that they will in 2020 they will have a 5G rollout, I'm sure and I'm confident that the government will be pursuing that policy and roll out the 5G plan. But the question is that how fast it will be rolled out and how quickly it will be rolled out in the country. You know, it depends more on the demand and supply. Because 5G technology has to be the ecosystem has to support the 5G technology. So maybe in the urban areas it will be rolled out in a much faster way than the rural communities. But what we're trying to do is that we are giving our best shot to provide the backhaul ready for 5G rollout. So whenever the 5G rollout in the country, so we are. In terms of we are ready for 5G rollout in rural communities as well. So let's see. So we're confident.
Right, sir. Thank you. But I would like to reiterate here, as some of the other esteemed panelists also mentioned, we do hear that with the rollout of 5G, a lot of we're coming up with a lot of policies, right, in terms of the technology advancements we've got now. We've been seeing drafts for the data protection bill, the NITB Act, social media rules, personal data protection bills, digital Pakistan policy, cyber policy, AI policy, blockchain, so on and so forth. Now, with the rollout of 5G, sir, do you think that we're going to need more policy recommendations? If yes, what are the three priorities that should be
in my personal opinion, and again, looking at the way the world is going, with 5G, yes, because your data is going to be out there with everyone. So it's important to have a right regulatory framework which should be in place, so your data can be protected and you can also protect the way with the GDPR, the European Union has done it, and the rest of the countries have done it. So yes, the good policies which protect the basic fundamental rights of individuals, but also facilitates in terms of the growth. There's nothing wrong with it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, sir. Now, Igor, from a more global perspective, since Mr. Haaris raised some very valid points as well, that with the rollout of 5G all over the world, I've been studying this as well in the sector that I'm working in. We have massive data sets. And obviously, there's a lot of personal information that's collected as well. What are some of the risks that you anticipate with regards to data and 5G in the future?
I'm glad you bring this question, and Haaris' point before, too, connected to this. One thing that nobody's talking about, and I think because it's something new, and maybe we saw that during now the pandemic, and starting out the pandemic, is cybersecurity. Nobody talks about cybersecurity and 5G deployment and even infrastructure deployment, which is related. I'm based in Europe, and there is a lot of discussion around GDPR and data protection, which is very important, but also this aspect of cybersecurity as not even as a service, as something that is embedded in the infrastructure itself. If you're thinking about having this widespread connectivity, where everything is going to be connected to being 5G or even a 6G or something in the future, is going to be super well connected. We're talking about a single person carrying 50, 60, 100 potential leak points. And if you expand that to a city level, it's almost uncontrollable in terms of cybersecurity. And if you think about how people behave around data protection, their own data protection, from basic stuff like password setting, it's almost impossible to think that entire cities will not be hacked very soon. So if we don't tackle that at the infrastructure level, at the coding level, at the kind of a basic foundation, we're going to create something that is going to be almost impossible to control. Like we see with the pandemic, had we paid attention to proper structure, we could have not have had the pandemic. We got the pandemic. Now let's deal with this. Same thing with cybersecurity. There is a pandemic in the making, and the moment that we start having this widespread connectivity, it's going to be almost impossible to control unless we have forums like this where we're talking about infrastructure, the foundation that should be dealt. So I think it goes related to your point. It's data protection, but it goes hand in hand again with cybersecurity, with security as a whole. That is not only digital, that is a security that involves a physical aspect of it and a digital aspect of it. So I think this is something
some very pertinent points made. That definitely a very, very pertinent point made. And Ubaid, I'm going to ask you this because whenever we talk about Meta, there are automatic concerns about security and data privacy and all of that. Now we do, Igor made an interesting point about security and data protection embedded into the infrastructure that we're setting. And also the fact that obviously with the rollout of the metaverse, there are obviously much larger potential data points because we see that even when we talk about the healthcare industry or the education industry, so on and so forth, there are going to be a lot of more than sensitive users as well. So what would your take be on the whole matter?
First of all, I do not qualify myself to be an expert on that or to have an opinion on that. I generally think that these are valid concerns. And when we were like when humanity was inventing aeroplanes, the aviation rules were not there, but we kept pace with regulations. We kept pace with what are the risks coming in and how do we can mitigate those risks. What are the policies that are needed, and those that should evolve and should evolve at a faster pace because the technology is evolving at a faster pace. But we cannot wait for aviation rules to finalize before the invention of, because then that's not a that not so I don't think that innovation can be stopped just because uh, you know it might pose some risk. But I think from a regulatory or policy perspective, policymakers and the policy people, and generally these forums like that we are sitting up now here and discussing these things, this proactive debate should continue. The policy should evolve faster than it is actually evolving, and in more, in a more open way where all the stakeholders, they combine their thoughts and come up with something that is more, applicable to all scenarios and use cases. And I think like I personally think that the way things are moving on the technology direction, eventually technology will come into it has already come into our life, and it will eventually come into our life much more. So we just need to keep pace with the changing environment from the policy angle, from the regulatory angles, and also from the society as such. Like the whole society has to evolve to be more conscious about the data protection, the more conscious about the cyber security, what is possible and what is not possible, what are the individual responsibilities, so those things will evolve. And I think forum like this, they present a good opportunity to create an awareness on this. I also want to think that we should not allow technology to create more gaps between haves and haves not. Uh, and I said in my previous question answer as well, that it's a great leveler. And just because it's only coming to the people who already have access to a lot of other privileges, will create a more societal divide. And as is a very common phrase from one of the writers, is that future has already come, it's just not equally divided. We have to make sure that it's equally divided. And then when it comes to risk also, the awareness is also equally divided. If people in urban center affluent areas are aware of their cyber security, and people in villages and tier 2 cities are not, that will also create a societal divide. So I think the awareness has to be distributed equally. So should the blessings of the technology, so that everyone can utilize their full potential. They don't have to travel hundreds of miles to come and attend a university to gain a skill. They should be able to do it from the backyard of their homes.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And I know the work that Mr. Haaris is doing with the USF is going to enable such equity, not just equality, but equity across the sectors, be it telemedicine, be it education, um, be it connectivity. But Mr. Haaris, my question to you is that obviously with 5G and large infrastructures, there is also going to be a lot of concerns with regards to the environment. We already know that, a lot of studies have said that, it's going to be posing huge risks for the environment. And but while in my research, I was reading that the USF has been including in some of its upcoming projects telecommunication sites through solar energy or sustainable, power generation. Would you like to comment on that, sir?
Yes. We at USS strongly believe in clean and green energy. So all our towers which have been installed across Pakistan, the first source of energy is always solar, and the secondary source is obviously backup generators and electricity. But our objective is that we should highlight the clean green energy in Pakistan. We should talk more about it. And we also ensure that in our projects, wherever the environmental challenges are being faced, they are being dealt with in that manner according to their certain rules and procedures which are laid by the government of Pakistan. But coming back to your question on the 5G and the challenges of the environment, I'm not an expert on it, but all I know is that the 5G technology is going to be a game changer. So it's going to be improving the lives of people dramatically, and people will also prosper in terms of their economic growth, and especially in the rural communities and also in urban communities, I would say. So I think our more focus should be on the positive sides of the 5G, which is going to transform the lives of people. And then there are something which for every technology, there are certain things which are associated with it that can create a hazard for the society or at an individual level. I think awareness is the key or the way forward towards it. We can create an awareness about that, around that, wherever we're doing it, and talk more about the positive things, how we can use the technology in a positive way to improve our lives. I think that's the way forward.
Right, sir. And if I may take the liberty to ask you this, with all the implementation of the projects related to 5G, I know that there has been a lot of involvement from the private sector as well. What are monitoring and evaluation initiatives, and do you think they're enough because I know the government is regulating a lot here, but do you think what's being done is enough?
There's always a room for improvement. So, and the technology is such an evolving subject that every day it needs improvement. So, as far as the US is concerned, yes, we are also learning, we are also evolving. We're trying to be more like a facilitator to the public sector and the private sector in terms of the growth. So, if you talk about any specific, I can answer that, but generally, I think this is more. The approach should be more like a facilitator.
Right, sir. So what are some of the encouragements that are being offered, to the private sector? Like if somebody wants to, let's say, international company wants to come in Pakistan and sort of, invest in the 5G sector.
The most important thing is that, my friend Ubaid mentioned about the population and the age of the population. Our 60% of the population is in the age group where they are growing and they are learning, they are under 35. So I guess the technology is more adopted by this age bracket. So I think the potential is huge, and our numbers also supports us in terms of the population. So whoever IT company or whoever telco company, when they look at Pakistan, they look at these numbers. So which is a very big incentive for them to come and get into the market. So that's why in the last 2-3 years, a lot of investments have come in terms of startups. The whole ecosystem is growing very rapidly. Telcos are all rapidly investing in leveraging infrastructure, using the data for financial inclusion. So I guess it's a very good emerging market with young population and youth.
Right. Thank you very much, sir. Going to Igor. So unfortunately, we're reaching towards the end of today's panel discussion. And I would like for you to sort of sum up your takeaway from today's session.
Sure. No, I think to be honest, I think it's super important what we just said in terms of equality. I think access to accessibility, access to infrastructure, access to technology, it creates equality. It creates if for every kid that is in a village that can actually have access to a world-class education, a world-class service, and this kid doesn't have to travel, doesn't have to use a car to access, we are improving life in so many ways. We're bringing cheap world-class education to anyone anywhere in the world. We are avoiding emitting more dioxide of carbon to the atmosphere. We are spreading the accessibility of new knowledge, new information, inspiring creativity. So I think we always talk about, in many other forums, we talk about just the technology itself, but we forget that technology is just an enabler for human ingenuity, for human creativity. And I think when we create projects like this or deployment of infrastructure like this, we're actually talking about deployment of human capacity, as long as we bring together all the ecosystems and all the creators and all the capital around. But I think we are now at the point of making a new internet, of making something completely new. I'm super excited about it. I think it comes with through this pandemic, this horrible period for humanity. But like in many other events of humanity, I think if we make it right, I think these very things that we're discussing today can make human capacity achieve another level through technology.
Absolutely. And, you've together some very, very interesting points here with regards to, affordable world-class education with contributions to the knowledge economy, and just appreciating the human ingenuity of the whole process. But Mr. Ubaid, my question to you is, in your final takeaway from all of this, what do you think the future with 5G technology look like, and what will be the future of work?
Yeah, so I think Igor will side with me on this, that for me the future looks like a metaverse. I think it is what it is.
Does.
and I'm happy that like Haaris and the team is doing an amazing work of taking that infrastructure to the rural areas, and it's a very forward-looking structure. So I think future from that perspective looks very bright, very integrated, and very equitable. Like the amazing thing about the future is that no matter how much you are afraid of it, you cannot just stop it. It's coming. It's better to kind of enjoy the ride and ride the wave that is coming our way. We are like Pakistan, as Haaris mentioned, from its population and demography, is in the right position. These young people, they will find their way out in the future all by themselves. All we have to do is enable the future for them and give them an equitable access, and they will figure out what is the best use of the technology for them. And the possibilities that are coming are unimaginable in terms of not only the technology wise they are like amazing, but in terms of adding value to life they are amazing. I'm very optimistic about the future, and I believe that as a mover or shaper of that future, like the generation that we are from, this is the best legacy we can leave for the future generation, that we provided to them an infrastructure, a policy framework whereby they can express themselves freely.
Absolutely, and you've beautifully summed it up. Mr. Haaris, Mehmood, your final thoughts. Mr. Haaris, Mehmood.
With the population and demographics which we have, we're very excited about the 5G and what 5G can do for us and how it can change our lives. So I guess whoever is listening, Pakistan is an exciting place to be in these days, and in upcoming technology, the way the things have been transforming. And secondly, I would just want to add to that, there'll be pluses and minuses of technology. So I think we should be more focused on pluses rather than on the minuses. And we can just create a awareness, and we can inform about the negative or the minuses of the technology, so people can be aware of it. But those negative and those minuses should not hamper the growth.
So we've lost you there. Are you still with us? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've lost Mr. Haaris there, but that's okay. It's all the time that we have for today's session. But on an ending note, I would like to thank you all for being here and being a part of this amazing panel discussion. It's been enlightening, to say the least. And my one takeaway from all of this is that when I was reading what the president of the carrier business group, Huawei, Mr. Ryan Ding, said about the future, that really resonates well. He said that the huge potential of 5G is now emerging. The entire industry needs to act now to build new capabilities and realize the 5G vision. That's what we do. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Haaris,
you.
Mehmood, I think I see you're back online. Is there a sentence that you'd like to end with? Or
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Haaris. Thank you, Igor. Thank you, Anza.